Yo, welcome into the Fantasy Wildcard DFS show. I'm Kev. We've got the band together tonight. We've got Mags. We've got Ali. For those watching the video, you can see I'm rocking the shades. I had a great week in DFS, boys. How about yourself?
No. Short answer, no. I was short on time. I only managed to enter our money maker, which you guys should, if you're listening, definitely enter in for week 4 as well. And yeah, I did terrible, but at least I didn't have time to lose any more money than just that one tournament. So that's something.
Yeah, I had a great week. Mainly focused on cash this week, so doubling up, building the bankroll early on in the season, and then was built a couple of good lineups for tournaments. So wasn't far off a pretty nice prize. So yeah, had a really good week for DFS. So let's keep it rolling.
Let's keep it rolling indeed. And obviously I'm wearing the shades because I was fortunate enough to win the money maker that we rolled this week. So that's why I'm rocking them. I've got to take my chance because it might not happen again this season. But yeah, we've got a really exciting show tonight. We're going to be looking at week 4 of the DraftKings main slate this week. It's a tricky slate looking at it overall, but we're going to go through and highlight the key plays at all positions for both cash and for the tournament play. We're going to jump straight into cash to begin with. So as always, you're looking for popular plays, you're looking for high ownership, you're looking for sort of high floors and high sort of ceilings don't have to be as high. It's all about beating half the field. So cash play, it's where you're playing it safe and you're looking to get the field to drag you along to the winning spots. And kicking off at QB, we've got Mags, who we are taking.
Just before we go in, so Kev, you've won the wildcard moneymaker, and I've won the wildcard moneymaker, right?
Yes.
Ali, you won it as well, right?
Yeah, balls. No, I haven't. Pretty much. The most annoying thing was I couldn't do it because I was out of the country and Greece does not support DraftKings, so I couldn't do it last week. But I did come second. I come third this week, and yeah, I'm getting closer. So next week I'm going to have the shades on.
This is your week. Yeah, we'll have to do that. But anyway, let's go into our our money builders, like you were talking about, Ali. I've got 2 CFSI's cash plays. We got Jalen Hurts at $8,000 up against the Washington Commanders, who they've looked okay here and there, but I expect Jalen Hurts and the Eagles to absolutely torch them and continue building on what is a really good season for the Eagles once again, which I'm sure pleases Kev. So don't think there's too many things that can falter you there with Hurts at 8,000 and below him just $200 cheaper, which I think is really nice against another struggling team. It's Justin Herbert at 7,800, who's going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, who again just don't look like they're up to much. Herbert and his team, I mean, luckily Herbert's head coach is so terrible that every game is a shootout, so that's quite nice for Herbert. So he's going to be building up some points for you. He is missing Mike Williams, but he's so talented. I'm not really even worried about that.
Yeah, these are both fine cash plays. I mean, first off, Jalen Hurts, if anyone remembers back to last season against Commanders, I think he'd absolutely put his cue on the rack at halftime, just absolutely destroyed him first half. The other game that he played against him was a bit more difficult. I think the Eagles actually lost that one, but he's at home. The Commanders, they got torched last week by the Bills, so I think that's a great pick. Then Herbert, like we've been saying, he's QB2 on the season. He's so safe. He's going to be really popular as well in a game which projected to be high scoring, and there could be against a Vegas team which might not have Jimmy Garoppolo as well. So he should be able to have his way if he wants it, and I think it's a great pick to start off tonight's show in cash. And we're now going to come to running back for 2 other great picks here with yourself, Ali.
Yeah, so not gone typically chalky or expensive of these picks, but I have gone for the number 1 fantasy running back on the season so far, Raheem Mostert at $6,500. Why is he still so cheap? The number 1 running back in football, I can't believe that he's this cheap. He's almost 3,000 less than Christian McCaffrey. His salary is up $500 this week, so it's worth noting that it's on the up. But I think Raheem Mostert is a good play in both cash and tournament formats. averaging nearly 6 yards per carry on the ground on the season, averaging 14 carries per game. So the floor is there. 7 receptions this week was really, really nice. 7 targets, 7 receptions, and a touchdown. Jalen Waddle, he remains in concussion protocol, so worth noting that, again, if he is to miss, the focus of this offense could be that running game as well. So most of it for me is a huge smash this week. Yeah, it's at Buffalo Bills, which was obviously a tough matchup, but it's going to get plenty of work on the ground. This offense just knows how to move the ball and averaging 43 points per game. I just think this is going to be an absolute shootout. So you want the people in this game, and at that price point, I'll take that. Second one is Zach Moss in a slightly easier matchup, $6,000 at home against the LA Rams. Quick question to you boys. Do you know how many times Zach Moss ran the ball this week against the Ravens?
19.
I was going to say 15.
It was 30 times he ran the ball this week. That is what we want. We want floor plays in cash game. Yep, 122 receiving yards. He also had a receiving touchdown, which was good. Wow. And he did well against a really tough Ravens defense. So he had 22 touches week 2. He had 32 touches week 3. So he's going to get 42 touches week 4. I just think he's in for another game with big volume against the Rams. They obviously trust him. He's on form. So I just think he's got such a safe floor. So Zach Moss at 6,000, I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, first off, you've got exposure to the highest over-under on the slate. He's going to be popular with the game we had last week, so I think it's an absolutely great shout in cash. Zach Moss was a fade of mine last week, which went horribly wrong. I thought he would have struggled against the Ravens, and that didn't go the way as planned. He scored that receiving touchdown where I don't know who the defender was, but he just got lost in space. So he shouldn't be an astronaut for that in that respect. But I think 2 great players. You're looking at volume. You're looking at guys that you can build a lineup where you're solid everywhere, and because they're not high prices, you're going to have that chance to go after the higher price guys at positions like wide receiver. And that brings me nicely onto my first pick for the cash wide receiver, Keenan Allen, 7,900. He's at the higher end. He's playing the Raiders at home. It ties in with actually what Mag said about Herbert, that yes, it's a cash play. You don't really want to be playing Herbert and Allen in the same cash lineup in case something happens, like an injury to one of those, or the stack not working out as planned. But I think for cash, he's absolutely solid. He's killing the league in volumes, in fantasy points per game, in targets. So someone that's absolutely safe. He's giving you the ceiling as well as being in the Miller Maker line a couple of times the past few weeks. So there's also a ceiling there. And to rhyme with ceiling, I've gone for a guy that any chance I can get this guy's name on the show, I'm going to do it. The ceiling of Adam Thielen. He's really stepped up as in the past few weeks. Looked brilliant with the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton. Hopefully it's Dalton again for the upcoming week. If not, Bryce Young. Yes, he's an upgrade for long term, but I think short term, get Dalton throwing it around. And 4,500 for Thielen is actually a pay down sort of play. You could stick him potentially in your flex even, but I just thought it was worth mention for that price, for the floor is going to give you in a game where it's very likely they're going to be behind. It's a revenge game against Minnesota as well. I think a lot is aligning to really favour the ceiling for Thielen this week. We're now going to move on to the flex spots where it can get a little bit spicy, but again, thinking cash, you're looking for solid volume. Who have you got in your flex spots, Max?
Yeah, so the first guy I've got is a running back who looked really, really good, actually, coming in, replacing Nick Chubb, who obviously very sadly is out for the rest of the season. That's Jerome Ford, who is still going for 5,400 against a Baltimore team that I presume will still be missing a hell of a lot of players next week. They were missing a lot of players this week. I don't see a lot of them coming back from injury, just overnight. So I expect the Cleveland Browns to do quite well against this Baltimore team. And I know Kareem Hunt is back, and many people might talk about, Hunt might, take over the backfield after a second week. You got to remember, Kareem Hunt knows this offense already. Kareem Hunt knows the playbook already. So why wouldn't he have just taken over right away? This isn't some new guy coming in. So I think Jerome Ford showing us that he should be the one running back there at Cleveland over a guy like Kareem Hunt. So I think he's good value at 5,400. Second one, a little bit spicy, right? Maybe not. I mean, like I said in week one, I am new to this, so I'm kind of learning as you guys are when you're listening. I've gone for George Kittle here, which is traditionally maybe not the best idea to have a tight end in your flex spot, but the reason I put him in here is because the Arizona Cardinals have not been good at playing the tight end this season, and Kittle at 5,100 I think is actually pretty good value for a flex player. And I mean, also it's George Kittle, right? He can go off. You know what he's like. And he's not really had a game like that yet this season where he's really exploded and gone off. This could be the week for him against an Arizona team that, quite frankly, need to be brought back down to earth.
Yeah, that's a shot at Paul picking. You've got to do it when you can. I think, first of all, Jerome Ford, if you've got people box score hunting, and so he had a pretty good week last week, 2 touchdowns against a tough Titans defense. Behind the touchdowns, there wasn't a lot there, but I think at the price, against an easier defense than Cleveland in Baltimore, I think it's definitely worth a shout. He's going to be popular until we see something from Kareem Hunt. So like the Jerome Ford pick, and running backs in flex are always welcoming cash plays if they're getting that volume. We saw Moss have a great week against Baltimore as well last week. And then the Kittle one, like, you can paint a story where actually if you're hitting at the tight end in your flex, it's great because Kittle's got that ceiling that, if he goes off 20 points, he can easily do that. He can do 15 points as well. So well within his range of outcomes. I think 2 tight end builds are something you can use more in a tournament where you're trying to get different from the field. But I think in this respect, with the matchup, Arizona, we know they've been traditionally bad against tight end. It's something that he's going to be safer than a lot of the picks down around the sort of 5,000, 4,000 range. So just depending on the build and the story you see in that game will depend on if he really hits the potential. If Arizona play like we did against the Cowboys, it could be a more interesting game than we suspect, but maybe not. We'll just have to see. And going from Kittle, we're going to keep it tight end. We're going to go to the cash tight end plays. We know it's an horrific position as a whole, but there's some nice players in cash.
Yeah, I'm going for George Kittle. No, I'm not really. I'm going for the number one. I went for the number one running back in football. So let's go for the number one tight end in football. TJ Hockenson, 6,500 at Carolina. Just a disclosure, if you look at the tight end slate this week, it's pretty disgusting. Without Kelsey, without Sam Laporta, you're struggling this week. But his salary remained unchanged from last week, and that was despite having 11 targets. So we really like that from your tight end, especially in cash. His best statistical game of the year, just didn't have any touchdowns, so probably why his salary remains unchanged. He still remains the second target behind, obviously, Justin Jefferson. This Vikings team are absolutely desperate for a win. I think they will get a win at Carolina. I just think it's going to be steady. Carolina aren't particularly great against tight ends. They're not a very good football team in general. I think the Minnesota Vikings probably won't be able to run the ball, but they will pass the ball a lot. With Kirk Cousins, who's a great fantasy asset at the minute, and TJ Hockenson is going to be uber safe for cash plays. The second one, again, when you talk about safe, probably not been this year, but in the past, has been an absolute stud. Mark Andrews, $5,400. This the cheapest that I've seen Mark Andrews in a long, long time. His salary's actually dropped 600. It started at 6,000 last year. Last week, it was 6,300 the week before. So he's dropping to a point where I want him in nearly all of my lineups, and I just think you're struggling to find consistency. Well, with Mark Andrews, you've always had consistency in the past. He's always been Lamar Jackson's number one target. I think it's a really tough matchup at the Cleveland Browns, where they've conceded 3 points in both of their games so far this year. But I just think with the Ravens losing last week against the Colts, they're going to be desperate to bounce back and perform well. So I think Lamar Jackson's going to have to pass an absolute ton. So I just think that Mark Andrews, that price point bounces back and you've got a safe floor. I think think he scores a touchdown this week. The Ravens certainly don't want to be 2-2, so I think he gives you a really safe floor.
Indeed, I think with tight end in both formats, actually cash and GPPs, that it tends to be a stars and scrubs approach where you're either going the high end where you're paying up and you're expecting they're going to hit, or you just throw a dart at the lower end and hopefully it's across. Even in cash, we talk about safety and balance, but actually if you do take a punt at a spot like tight end and pay 2,900, 3,000, yes, you might miss on that, but it's still giving you an absolute supreme balanced team elsewhere. So don't be scared about the cheap tight ends, but also I think you should tend to have more salary as well in cash, which means you can then pay up for guys like Andrews, Hawkinson, and even Gill. And we're going to go to the cash defense and special teams plays this week. I think the two chalky ones, which is what I'd be looking for cash this week, you've got the Chargers who play the Raiders, who Jimmy G is looking questionable for that. They're not a great offense. I think you want to target teams that are going to be passing and maybe haven't got the best passers. That would have led you to a team such as the top two from last week. The Bills playing Howell. You had the Lions playing Ridder. Follow that theme and you shouldn't be too far wrong. So, yeah, Chargers against Jimmy G's backup. Is it Hoyer, someone like that, I think. And then the other alternate I would play is going to be music to one of our co-hosts here. So we've got the Bucks who are playing the New Orleans Saints. I think Jameis Winston, he's likely to play over Derek Carr. Derek Carr, not his brother. I think there's opportunities there for turnovers, for sacks, for mistakes. So they're the two that I imagine will be chalky based on the QB injuries. And essentially that's all you want in cash, just the popular plays, defense and special teams. We're now going to move on to tournament lineups, GPP lineups. So you're looking to get a little bit funky, a little bit crazy, stacks, unique plays, correlation plays. You're looking to try and be the number one overall in your contest. So we're going to kick off at QB. We've got some funky plays to begin with, guys that are very polarizing in the community. And over to you, Max.
Yeah, it's two guys that maybe not the most liked guys in the community, that's for sure. Probably the most disliked. Well, one definitely is the most disliked guy in the community, and the other one's Deshaun Watson. We've got, starting off with Deshaun Watson. He's $6,000 against the Baltimore Ravens, who again will be missing a lot of people in that defensive setup. So I think Watson's a guy that has looked better and better each week. Last week, definitely his best performance, apart from that weird little slip fall. What the hell that was? Scrub that out. He looked pretty good, and I expect him to look pretty good again against the Ravens. And the second one, the most hated guy in the football community, it's Danger Russ himself, Mr. Russell Wilson, who, last week he was sneakily I think he was quarterback 5 of the year. Last week, I'm not sure where he is heading into this week, probably a lot lower after that performance against the Dolphins. But he's playing the Chicago Bears, who absolutely suck. He's 5,800. The Broncos are going to want a big bounce back. There's no way Sean Payton's taking that defeat lying down. I expect Russ Wilson to have a pretty big game against the Bears.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think Wilson, he's top 6 on the year. He's looked pretty decent despite some of the performances of Denver overall. I really like Russ. I think with Watson, I've called him a potential million-maker QB if you get it together. If that defense ever falters, there's going to be opportunities there. It is a low over-under with the Ravens, but there's got to be a turning point where that defense starts giving up big plays. And if he does get to that potential shootout type thing, he's got weapons there as Watson, and he's not going to be a highly owned play. So I think, if you tell a story that it's going to be higher than the low over-under that it is, then he's going to be someone that's sneakily under-owned and someone that you can be sticking into your GPP lineups. We're now going to move on to running back, and we've got a couple of interesting guys here. Someone that's right at the high end of the pricing, and then someone lower end. What a value this guy is. Who have you got, Ali?
So talking of the higher end, it doesn't get any higher than Christian McCaffrey, $9,200 versus the Arizona Cardinals. And I just want to see Paul Pickens' face when Christian McCaffrey runs for 5 touchdowns against his team. I just think, it's going to be a chalky play, mega expensive, obviously, but I just think he just has the ability to run for 3 or 4 touchdowns or catch a couple of touchdowns against this Arizona defense that is not very good on paper against the running back. It's been pretty terrible, 26th against running backs. I just think, I'm just looking at the lineups thinking I just don't want to miss out on that upside, because I just see him being in all the winning lineups because he'll have 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns quite easily. Looking at the Cardinals, they gave up 185 rushing yards versus Dallas, which sounds a lot considering they won the game by 12 points, which is, the NFL is just crazy. But I just think also that Josh Dobbs and this Cardinals team they can put up points themselves. So I just think personally that's what you want. You don't want Christian McCaffrey benched at halftime because the 49ers are 31-0 up or something like that. You don't want to see that. You want to see the Cardinals actually fight back and score 3 points to themselves. I'm just scared if he's not in my lineups, then I don't have that ceiling with Christian McCaffrey. I just think he's going to go absolutely berserk this week. And then my second pick is a guy that absolutely torched my team last night, the Bucks, in DeAndre Swift, $5,700 against the Washington Commanders. And I just think it's going to be a walk in the park for Philadelphia against the Commanders that were awful against the Bills. Swift has been absolutely immense the last 2 games, 305 rushing yards the last 2 weeks, averaging nearly 7 yards per carry. Washington gave up nearly 170 rushing yards to Buffalo. James Cook had a really nice game, so I just think the ceiling is there for DeAndre Swift to run in a couple of touchdowns. You got to think that the Eagles are going to get some turnovers from Sam Howell, so it could give even more scoring opportunities for DeAndre Swift. And we saw Kenny Gainwell. He was worked back in. I think he actually ended up with 46% snap percentage and opportunities, but I think that was more towards the end of the game where the game was won for Philadelphia. I just think while everybody's talking about Taylor Swift, I'm a Swiftie for DeAndre.
I love that. It was awesome last night. There was some massive gaps for him to get through, but if you compare the performance with Kenny Gainwell, it's clear that Swift is the 1A in that backfield. So I really like that pick. And then CMC, he's the highest priced running back on the slate, but actually that will cause people not to go for him, and his ownership will be. Even though you think, he's going to be a high ownership, it won't be super jockey up at that price. So I think really good picks on that. We mentioned Swift and that Washington game. We also mentioned Hurts a little bit earlier. Going to keep the theme and go for Devontae Smith as my first GPP wide receiver play. I think we saw with AJ Brown last night, the squeaky wheel got the plays last night. I think the upcoming week it's going to revert back to a more split wide receiver approach. Devontae Smith had an awesome couple of games last season against Washington. 7,500. It's a really attainable price, I think. Maybe people gravitate towards Brown after his big week, but I'll be gravitating more towards Devontae Smith. And then the second option, it's probably more of a flex play if I'm being totally honest, but I really want to mention this guy, Marvin Mims, 3,900 at the Bears. It ties in really nicely with Mag's pick of Dangerous Wilson. I think Mims, he's not getting a ton of snaps, not running a ton of routes, but when he's getting the ball, when he's getting the opportunity, he's really bringing it home. He's got the explosive play in him. If he scores an 80-yard touchdown, for example, that's in his range of outcomes. That's nearly 5x of what it's going to cost you. So Marvin Mims is a guy that I'll be throwing a dart on, maybe as a part of a double stack with Russ Wilson, or maybe just something against maybe a DJ Moore on the other side. But really interesting guy that could have been a flex, and we are going to move to flex now to Max and his GPP flex plays.
Yeah, I've got two. One kind of a bit safer than the other, though. I'll start with a risky one, I think, and it's just somebody who's been slowly creeping on, been up in the snap share. It's not the Tennessee running back you might assume it is. It's Tajay Spears, who's going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. He's at $4,700, and whatever the Tennessee Titans are doing, it's obviously not working. And they have somebody like Tajay Spears, who is an explosive playmaker that I think could make a real difference against the Bengals team that is really, really struggling. So, this is tournament play. He's going to be incredibly, incredibly lowly owned, I would guess. And he's someone that I see has a potential to really blow up. And if he gets a chance to get these runs and get these, especially these catches that he is capable of making, I can, you always talk about telling stories. I could see a story where Tajay Spears has his breakout week, against the Cincinnati Bengals. We just seen it last week with Devin Achane, who's seen that coming, right? So if he could do it, why not Tajay Spears, a guy that people had as just as good as Achane in the first place? And the second one, maybe less surprising, someone who's looked great the last few weeks, that's Tank Dell, who's going up against Pittsburgh Steelers, 4,600. CJ Stroud, we talked about on the Dynasty Show, looking really, really good. Tank Dell seems to be becoming a favorite weapon of his, so I could see him having a pretty solid game against the Pittsburgh Steelers at 4,600 as well. Pretty good flex play.
Yeah, Tank Dell's tiny, but it's a tiny price as well this week. 4,600. It's more than it was last week, but I think the jump's not too crazy to get involved again, and he's got a good matchup to really make some great plays and really hit off in your flex at a cheap price. You tend to be having the cheaper price guys in your flex, so you're not expecting tons, but he has got that upside to hit like he did last week, the 25-30 point game they had. Tajay Spears, yeah, I think with this running back in the flex, it tends to be sort of a lower ceiling play, but as you mentioned, a spike week with like an Achane, if he was in your flex last week, you've absolutely crushed it. And like we said on the Dynasty Show, we are worried about Derrick Henry with this foot injury in the short term. Maybe that picks up after the bye week. I think one thing to just remember with your flex spots is if you pay down and they don't perform, that's generally not going to harm your lineup as such. We saw we have a big tournament in the UK with the Ashes where I think the top two, one team had Kendre Miller in, someone else had another guy that barely performed, less than 5 points. So it's not a death sentence to have a low priced guy in your flex that doesn't hit. But I think interesting on Dell. Spears, if you call this one, Mags, you can pick my lottery numbers next week on that one. We're now going to move to tight end and the GPP picks to you, Ali.
Yeah, so I've gone for a guy that really needs to step up for his team. It's Gerald Everett, 3,600 against the Las Vegas Raiders. I think we quite like that matchup. Obviously, Mike Williams lost for the season, which is terrible, but Gerald Everett at 3,600 I think is a really intriguing price. He's obviously not broken out yet this season. He's been pretty disappointing. Everybody's talking about whether it's going to be Quentin Johnson or Josh Palmer that's going to step up. But Gerald Everett actually saw increased targets and some dump-offs as well last week. It was just really annoying to see Donald Parham get 2 touchdowns. I mean, his stats was two targets, 2 receptions, 4 yards, 2 touchdowns, which was really, really annoying. But looking at the matchup, the Raiders are struggling against tight ends, 28th against tight ends. They've conceded touchdowns to tight ends in both their last 2 games. So you like to see that. I think Gerald Everett, with Mike Williams gone, I think he's got plenty of upside, and at such a cheap price, he can fit into your lineup. And then even cheaper is Pat Freiermuth. So I think it's about time that Postman Pat delivered. 3,400 at the Houston Texans. He scored touchdowns in 2 of his 3 games this season. And it's against the Houston team that's been really very competitive with CJ Stroud putting up plenty of points. They've scored 37 on the Jags to win this week. The over-under is only 42 points, just quite a low over-under. They're obviously expecting quite a low-scoring game, but I personally think this smashes the over. I think both of these teams, their offense wants to bounce back. As well as especially the Steelers want to bounce back. I still think that Freiermuth is Pickett's number 2 option behind George Pickens at the minute. The other wide receivers are struggling, so I'm just waiting for that breakout to happen for Freiermuth. And why can't it be in this game at 3,400? I think that's a great price.
Yeah, I mean, Everett, first of all, he wears like number 7 or something daft, does he? I mean, these numbers just crazy. I know Swift has 0 on as well. Just it makes it tricky because back in the day, people used to have the number and that was it. And nobody ever changed the numbers too much. But yeah, back to the DFS. I think Everett's an interesting play. It's a great over-under environment to really smash. And it's a leverage play on people that are going for Keenan Allen if he underperforms. I think Freiermuth, really like it. I think he made a great point that he's the number 2 target on that team. and the game environment suggests that it would be a lower over-under. So another great shout in your tournament play. I'm going to come on to defence and special teams. Earlier on, I mentioned in cash games looking for something popular. In tournament play, maybe not so popular. You're looking for, I guess, the opportunity to create turnovers, sacks, interceptions, etc. And also, I like targeting bad QBs. There's no better place to start than Kenny Pickett. I'm going to go for the Texans 2,900. They did a pretty good job on Trevor Lawrence. Granted, some of that was on the wide receivers as well, but the defense had to make those plays. And we do like the Texans, the team growing overall on both sides of the ball. So that's one to think about. The other one, it's not against bad QB. I'm taking the Browns 2,800 against Lamar Jackson and co. I think the Browns have been unbelievable to start the season. I mentioned Jim Schwartz earlier on tonight. And yeah, there might not be tons of points in this. Might be tons of opportunities for turnovers, etc. But I just feel that it could be close. You could see the Browns pull away a little bit in the second half. And then that's where Lamar starts making the mistakes. Because truth be told, he's an elite QB. But I think when you play catch up, that's when you can get your points for your DFS lineups. So that's it, lads. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us and to subscribe to us on X and YouTube at Wildcard DFS and at Fantasy Wildcard. We do this show every Wednesday. As you mentioned at the start, if you do want to take part in our £5 winner takes all Wildcard DFS Moneymaker contest each week, please do keep your eyes peeled and drop the information to that on a Thursday evening. The more entries we get, the more prizes that we generate. Nobody wants to see me wearing the shades again, so please do come in, have a go, and it's a great opportunity to win a decent amount of money at a great rate. So please get involved. Thank you once again. Have a good